In the last episode, we got this so it finally stops, and stops pretty darn well. Oh God. But I'm sure you can hear this actually sounds more like a diesel than it does a gasoline engine. We need to adjust the valves. You can probably hear it's on a really high idle. I brought it out here so we could spray the intake, and yes, we do have an intake leak. So now that it's really nice and hot, let's pull it inside and pull the intake off. These vehicles have a massive amount of vacuum lines. So what I'm going to do is use some colored markers, some colored tape, and start pulling off vacuum lines, get the intake off. I do need to drain a little bit of coolant out because we have coolant going through our throttle body. And yeah, and we'll just start disassembly. Just take this off. And one big issue with these is these rubber boots tend to crack. Oh, that one's cracked. Ah, bugger. Well, that's part of our high idle issue right there. It was already cracked. They tried to glue it shut. So we have compounding issues here. So you can see they already glued that crack shut. And this crack was right there. And the issue is you have your mass airflow here, which measures the airflow going into the engine. So if you have a crack like that after your mass airflow, that's actually going to mess with the computer. And now I'm just undoing the little coolant lines for the throttle body, undoing part of the EGR here. I'm hoping it comes undone. And oddly enough, the oldest wrench I own fits. Oh boy.
One eternity later.
Oh boy. I guess we'll try taking the EGR valve off. No, that doesn't give me any movement. Oh, how long is this EGR tube? Come on. Oh, the not so funny bone. Oh, one more vacuum line. There's always one more vacuum line. Yay, I did it. And all the gaskets broke. No wonder the plenum was leaking. Look at this. So you can see a nice shiny new black gasket right there. And a beat up old brown factory gasket right there. So that's almost a perfect match, other than that little piece I peeled off. But I don't know if you can see right here, the old gasket squished the new gasket, but where there wasn't, it didn't get squished, and that's exactly where I was getting a change in RPM when I was spraying it down. And you can feel the ridge where the old met the new. So I can't believe they didn't even pull this old gasket off. That's a factory gasket. Grrr. All right, so as I was cleaning off the mating surfaces here, I put an eyeball over on all my vacuum lines, and I discovered a big old cut in one of the vacuum lines. So vacuum leak number 3. So unfortunately, this part of the harness was sitting on top of the air injection rail, which goes into the exhaust and obviously gets real hot and kind of crispied our wires here. Doesn't look like it burned through completely. So this is a pretty key components in how this runs. So I'm going to strip this back. Oh, it's so brittle. All right, so I taped up the wires. Even though they were a little crusty, I don't think they were burnt through to the wire. So I taped it up, put on some plastic wire loom, and now I'm just going to tape on this heat shield, fiberglass stuff. It's a little janky, I know, but I don't really feel like unpinning these and going through all that because, like I said, hopefully the end game is an LS in this. We'll see how that pans out, but for the time being, this will help keep it protected. Like I said, I'll run it underneath that, hopefully. That will still reach the sensors they need to. Like I said, this orange tape will be an aha to anyone in the future that there may be a problem under here. We've got it back in, it's all hooked up. Let's give it a shot, see what happens. Had the truck outside, I was trying to set the timing. As I leaned up on the valve cover to reach down, I squished the hose that goes to our, basically it's idle air control. They call it the ISC valve. When I did that, my idle dropped. So there's a little pintle in here, and this controls extra airflow going into the intake for idle. I don't think it's working. So broke out the manual, did the ohms resistance test, and that came out good, but I'm not convinced it's working properly. So because our wiring harness got burnt, I am basically just going to check the conductivity to the computer to make sure that the computer is still getting a signal. So I've got battery disconnected. I have my plug here for the ISC, which is idle speed control. And I am just going to put a pin in there. And I'm going to check the wires one by one. So the computer was up here in the underside of the dash, and I pulled the 3 plugs out. And the manual tells you that this plug here is for the idle air control, and that right there, red with the black, is the one I have traced now. So that should go right in there. You don't want to force them in and ruin the plug. And then I take my multimeter. So we have conductivity in that wire. Now I just have to go pin the other 5. So next thing in the list, since I back pinned the wiring harness, all 6 wires are good, computer's getting a reading, I thought I would pull off the throttle body and inspect that. I have already cleaned it because the inside of this throttle body was completely jammed up with just carbon oil crud, and these 2 vent ports were completely plugged. So that's obviously not going to help. I've already cleaned it, and I broke open the manual to check our throttle position sensor. And that goes right on there, and as you turn the throttle, that turns your throttle position sensor, and come to find out, it's dead. The ISC relies on the throttle position sensor working, so hopefully this has been the culprit all along. But I'll show you real quick here what I did. So you want to put your meter on ohms resistance. You come over here into the manual, and you want to clip onto VTA and E2, and you should have 0.3 thousandths to 6.3 thousandths, and I have 129, which is far below what we should have. Now next would be to check IDL pin and the E2 pin, and I should have less than 2.3 thousandths ohms, and I have nothing. So it's not even getting a reading, so the computer was basically just in its fallback mode, and when I move the throttle position sensor, we get nothing. So it wasn't even getting a reading. So I got a new one locally to set the throttle position sensor. So they say insert a 0.93 millimeter thickness gauge between throttle stop screw and stop lever. Connect test probes of an ohm meter to the terminals IDL and E2 of the sensor. Gradually turn clockwise until the ohm meter deflects. Now, I'm assuming ohm meter deflecting is infinite, which should give me zeros. And so we'll start from there, make sure we're not making contact. Right there. So I have my meter here on ohms resistance, and we basically have two measurements we need to take. 0.77 millimeters will be continuity, 1.09 millimeters will be no continuity, and you're basically adjusting your throttle position sensor. I have already done that. I have checked for continuity at 0.77. And at 1.09, we have no continuity. So that comes in spec. This appears to be good. Our throttle body's nice and clean. Let's install. All right, I think I have everything connected, including the battery. Let's fire it up, pull it outside, let it warm up, and fingers crossed, it's finally going to idle normally. A resounding success, sitting there idling at 750. Excellent, our idle is solved. Idling at 750, idles up with the air conditioning turned on, everything's perfect. Now we're going to do a valve adjustment. Our alternator has lost a bearing, so we're going to change the alternator, change the belt, and hopefully then it'll be a nice quiet ride again, instead of all this squeaking and clanking and banging. But this is all going to be in the next episode. So please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment down below. As always, thank you for watching.